Welcome to Becoming Spiritual, a podcast about the magic that surrounds us and has always been a part of us. I'm your host, Heather Dolan, a passionate seeker dedicated to bringing together beautiful humans who are doing amazing things in this world. Together, we will explore healing modalities and practical spiritual practices that can enrich your everyday life. We will also hear stories of awakenings, many from people in the corporate world who have broken out of the spiritual closet. Wherever you are in your journey, know you have found a community of open-hearted individuals committed to making themselves and our world a better place. Welcome home. In today's episode, I have the privilege of sitting down with my twin sister, Nicole. And while this is not a typical episode where I might be interviewing someone to learn about different practices, there's so much learning that will come from our episode of sharing stories and a big part of her journey, how we can look back at all these different moments in our life and see how they were divinely guided and just one of the many breadcrumbs on our path. And so we talk about everything that this podcast is about, from shifting out of this corporate space and how she found what she was meant to be doing, to her journey of healing from childhood and all the different modalities that she tried, experienced, and found a lot of healing through. We do discuss pregnancy, loss, miscarriage for those who might not be able to listen to this part. It's pretty far down in the episode. It'll probably be close to the hour mark. We did go a bit over the hour here. We just had so much to dig into. And I think, again, a lot of really important things that we talked about will resonate with so many, of just sometimes finding joy in the everyday moments, how we can go through these points in our life of healing and not even know that we're really going through healing at the time. We're just sometimes moving through things and things are being put on our path and we're experiencing them and end up having just really profound experiences. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. It really came from both of our hearts, and I know we are just really happy to be able to share all the parts of our journey that we thought would be helpful for our listeners. So thank you for listening, and let's jump into the episode. Welcome back to Becoming Spiritual. I am very, very excited. I know I'm very excited normally, but I'm giving you an extra very because I am joined by my identical twin sister, Nicole, or as I call her Nikki. So you're going to hear me call her Nikki because Nicole sounds weird to me, but everyone else knows her as Nicole. Nicole is joining us this morning. So welcome, sis.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yes, she so aptly came into the studio this morning, signed in as Twin A, because our whole lives, started out as she was Twin A because she was born first. I'm Twin B, so I did change my name. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see our twin titles on there. My sister just reminded me that our voices sound very similar. So this could be really trippy, but it'll be interesting to see how this lands out there in the collective as you're listening to our conversation, to see if you can figure out who's who sometimes, because it might actually be difficult. Over our lifetime, we have literally not been able to identify each other's voices separate from one another on answering machines. Those who are OG and remember answering machines and voicemail, we lived together and we'd call and be like, hello, can you pick up? Are you there? And we wouldn't know who actually left that message. We're like, was that you? Was that me? When we'd go through to delete all the messages. So hopefully it's not too confusing who's talking when, but we will do our best. I think we'll be okay. So I'm so happy to have you here. And like I said, we're going to cover a lot of different things today. And I think there's been some things sprinkled in, which she reminded me of the other day in episodes when I've shared a little bit about my sister, our relationship. And certainly in the intro, I talk a little bit about it. And so I guess I should have you introduce yourself and just share who you are. That would be fun. And then I want to talk about something that came to me as a way to open this around being twins and what that means for others. You don't have to be a twin to have a really close sibling relationship, or it could be a chosen family, could be a really good friend that you have, someone that you consider sister-like. And I want to talk a lot about that relationship because I think this day and age, we can get really stuck in comparison and all of those things. So I definitely want to kick off there, but I want you to introduce yourself first, sis, and tell us all the amazing things you are in this world.
Actually, it's funny. I hadn't thought about that in terms of an introduction, because I don't know that I've introduced myself personally in a long time as opposed to professionally, where you just give the highlights of work life and not all the other parts of ourselves. So that's kind of interesting. But
You can cover it all.
I can cover it all. Yep. Okay. Well,
You're both.
And yes, exactly. Thank you. I am a mother. Became a mother at 47. I gave birth to my son, Phineas, in December, a year and a half ago. And so that has become just the biggest thing in my life, the greatest joy as well. So I'd say that's primary, but I'm also a wife in addition to being a mother. And I'm also by training now a psychologist and a behavior analyst. I've been working in the field of special education and disabilities, primarily with children with autism for the last 15 years now, I guess. And even kind of coming into that career was a big shift for me in recognizing that I started after graduation in business and realized that wasn't my purpose. That wasn't really fulfilling anything in terms of what I was feeling called to do. And that was wanting to work with children. I didn't know in what capacity, didn't know where that journey would lead. And I think, as we'll talk about a lot today, in terms of those journeys being something that you just have to discover and kind of take one step at a time and see where it leads. And I think that's been certainly the story of my life and probably yours and many others too. So I've been doing that work in schools. I've worked in hospitals and clinic settings, as well as in homes. And it's just been an incredible experience from that perspective as well.
She's a doctor too. She didn't say that, but she actually got her doctorate. So I'm just going to plug that there because, yeah, you didn't mention that part. So she's technically Dr. Nicole.
I am, yes. Or as our childhood friend would say, Dr. Nikki Noodle is my most professional title.
Exactly.
Yes. What else, sis? I'm a twin. I'm a twin to you. I feel like that's been a defining part of, obviously, both of our lives for... Yeah, all of it. So it's a huge part of me and our families. I feel like it's just such an important part of, I know, my happiness and the reason that my wife and I moved here 4 years ago to be closer to you and your family, and how important that is for me, and to have that connection with you, daily, and with your family and my family, and now getting to have our children grow up together, which is a dream come true.
Thank you for that lovely intro. And so where I wanted to start first was, I remember identifying when I had my first kind of professional bio that had to go out for an RFP, and I was putting this together. So everyone at this point knows I'm a sales executive, and I had talked about competition, and I kind of joke around that I was born a twin. So I came out of the womb like already competing for all the things: attention, food, get my diaper changed.
Oxygen when you were first born.
Oxygen. Yes, oxygen too. That was my first. Yep. And it's interesting because when you go on this journey and you get to have some really cool spiritual experiences, I've actually gone through my birth. I've experienced that through regression. So I actually know what it's like now. I can speak from a very different place, but I used to really see myself as having this, we always describe ourselves as having our built-in best friend. And so it's a really beautiful gift, because while many people, especially women now, are seeking friendships as they get older and true authentic friendships, that's something, being a twin, that I think we're really lucky, because even if everything burns down around us, we have this connection. Not that every twin, I have met some twins that aren't that close and that's their path, but that's not our path. Our path is being really close. And so when I look back at this bio, I would say I'm naturally really good at sales because of competition, because I understand competition. I've understood it from a really young age. And when I reflect on that, it actually makes me really sad, because as we know, competition is actually meant to separate. It's not meant to bring us together. And I think I spent a lot of our childhood and younger years trying to separate myself, trying to have my own identity, because it can be hard, especially when you're an identical twin and you grow up in a really small town where everyone knows you as the twins or the Pearson twins, didn't know how to tell us apart. And to the point someone got us shirts that said, "I'm not Nikki, I'm not Heather" on the back for, I don't know, was that like our second birthday or something? First birthday? I don't know.
No, seventh birthday.
Oh, seventh. See,
Mhm.
she knows all this stuff. So that just gives you some context. Like we were just this package deal all the time, moving through life. And I think you loved it. And me, I was like, oh my gosh, I just want to be my own person. And so I, for a long time, wore that as like a badge of honor of I'm this like fierce competitor and I want to be successful and I want to win whatever, win deals, win this, win that. And going through this journey, I realized how that's actually not how we're meant to move through the world. It's how this world has been structured to do that, to actually separate us and not have us together, because together we are incredibly powerful as humans. And so, because I know we have different, as I already set this up, different experiences in life. And I'm sure many other people have felt this too, where they either have a sibling that they've always competed with their whole life, or that they were always trying to one up or always felt less than. And I think for me, I came to this space feeling that you were always better at everything, which I know you said you thought was really surprising that you didn't know I felt that you were better at everything when you heard me talk about it in an episode, which PS, if you have a podcast, a lot of stuff comes out that I guess you've never verbalized or said in a certain way. So
Yeah, I'm learning a lot too.
yeah. So I'm curious. Yeah. So I've said a lot, so I'm going to leave that. How do you feel?
Yes, you are correct. I think I felt very differently growing up, and there's not enough time to unpack all of that in terms of our childhood experiences with why I think I felt very not just connected to you, but yes, I always viewed us as individuals. So I wasn't searching for kind of that identity. It didn't feel wrapped up in you in a way that I couldn't differentiate myself or see myself as me. But at the same time, I also relied on you a lot in having separation anxiety as a kid, and as our parents were separating, then divorcing, and just having, for me, that truly from a clinical perspective, trauma of that and fear around that. I really relied on you. You took on that caretaking role of me at a very young age. I know that you've carried that in terms of that sense of responsibility as well. And certainly we had, our mom is incredibly loving. Our granny was the same and like a second mother to us. But it didn't matter in those moments. It was you who was always there, and you who I relied on a lot to, I think, for my own security. And so that was really meaningful and important to me. And so I always just appreciated that in you. And as I've carved out my own path in my life, it's always been us walking side by side together. I've never wanted to be ahead or behind, just next to, though it is ironic, as I said, that I had this vision of like when we used to go out walking together.
That literally just popped in, and you'd always be ahead of me, like 2 steps, and she'd be talking to me, turned around, and it would make me insane. Because I'm like, could you not basically speed walk, which she was in better shape than me. So for her, it was like her normal pace. But for me, it was like we were in like the walking Olympics. And yeah. So
as Robin would say at Peloton, we were the mall walkers of the 90s. So that, yeah. But it is true. Like, I didn't actually want to be those steps ahead. I really did. I just wanted to be together. You know, I wanted us to go to college together. And you were like, heck no, I'm getting kind of far away. I want to do my own thing. And so, yeah, just very different experiences that way. Not to say that we haven't had our struggles too in our relationship, but certainly I think that separation, honestly, was a great thing at the end of high school for us to really appreciate one another in a very different way that I think we've since in coming back together after college and living together and just this entire lifetime together since then. I think we've both had even more of a greater appreciation for one another that I think that experience ultimately provided for us. So,
yeah, and definitely the separation to come together. And I'm sure lots of people, you know, we've heard the old adage of if it's meant to be, you'll come back together. Usually when it comes to relationships, if you break up or you're far apart, or if you have long distance relationship, if it's meant to be, it'll all work out. And for us, yeah, as soon as I went 4 hours north of home and she went 4 hours south, basically. So we were pretty much 8 hours apart. And it was incredibly eye-opening for me, at least. I was like, oh my gosh, she's really far away. And this is in a time where you actually paid for long distance phone calls. And it was really expensive to talk. And so we would get these prepaid phone cards. I remember MCI and I don't know, whatever other companies. This will be a fun trip down memory lane for people. But I remember signing up for credit cards. I had like way too many credit cards by the end of freshman year. And a lot of it was driven by they'd give you phone cards. So like you signed up and you get whatever off your purchase. But a lot were like, we'll give you 2 hours of long distance phone card calling. And I was like, great, because I had no money and we were putting ourselves through college, both through private universities. And so that was a big motivator for me. And I realized how much in that moment by being separated, I got what I asked for, but it actually wasn't what I needed. And so it was what I needed, I should say. Correction. It was what I needed. It ended up being not what I wanted because I did miss her terribly. And it was very hard being in school and being away. But we both were able to have our own journeys and grow a lot and mature a lot and then really appreciate the time that we did have together. And I think for me, that was probably a big turning point where I did appreciate what I had. When I kind of pseudo lost it, I didn't really lose it, but obviously that dynamic day to day changed. And so that was really, really big. And then, we talked a little bit about the competition piece just for people out there who might be feeling that with someone. This day and age, we're so bombarded from a social media perspective with all these things outside of us that are supposed to make us happy or make us better or will make us look prettier, younger, or skinnier, help us put on muscle or whatever it might be. I mean, you can literally just open up your phone now and feel like crap pretty much instantly if you want to, looking at everything. And so the competition piece, going back to that, the unworthiness, I think that's really, if I look at what I was up against maybe in younger years with us playing some of the same sports, always feeling like she was better than me right out of the gate. And it's funny, you were saying you didn't actually feel that. You didn't think that.
Yeah.
Having different experiences, that was my lens is, oh my gosh, my sister's just doesn't even have to practice and she's better than me. And yeah, it was interesting.
But I will say we've been able to be a mirror for each other, though, I think in so many ways where one of us can voice feeling less than or not capable or not doing enough or whatever that is. And I think both of us have been a really incredible mirror for the other in terms of that validation when we've needed it. It's not like we haven't needed it, but to be able to even reflect back our own experiences or, hey, do you remember when I felt this way and you told me this? Or, when I went through something similar, and obviously so many of us have those people in our lives. Maybe it's not your twin, but we have the benefit of that where I think that's been, for me, so incredibly helpful. I think even in our spiritual journeys, and I know we'll get into this, the ebb and flow and how we've come together and learned things from one another, but then also, like I've shared with you, feeling like your journey has just exploded. I feel like I've been on this really slow walk for decades, and you just talk about coming out of the gate and really just going to this whole new level, which I'm so incredibly proud of you and humbled by and inspired by. But it's not like there aren't moments where I feel like, oh, I should know more. I should learn more. I should be doing this, right? And you're actually a great reminder to me of you're on your own journey. It's your own path, as is the case for all of us. And that's been really helpful for me. But at times I've struggled with that when you're sharing certain things. And I'm like, should I know about that? Should I be doing that? I should be meditating more. I should be writing more. I should be taking this course, and
you're shoulding all over yourself, which we're going to stop with the shouldings. Yes.
Right.
Anyone else who needs to hear that, I'm sure you've heard that. But I'm telling you now, you've got to stop. And I think that's where I was going with this in a long-winded way is if you have someone or if you're looking outside of yourself and just focused on social media and thinking about all the things you aren't and shoulding is coming up. I should do this. I should buy this. I should start this fitness regimen right now. I should. If that's in the vocabulary, then it's actually something that you need to just not do and come back to yourself and come back into figuring out who you are inside and doing some of that work. Because going back to where we started the conversation, it's meant to separate. That's the whole point of it. It's not meant to bring us together. And while social media, I mean, you're probably finding this podcast through social media. So it certainly has very great things about it and things that are helpful. And it does help connect us in many ways. It's a matter of, are you able to see through a lot of the other noise to get to the good stuff, all this stuff of feeling not enough? And I think for me, a lot of my journey of that started with my childhood, as most do, in my relationship with Nikki. because I was constantly in this comparison mode because I had her by my side and saw her doing things and always thinking I wasn't doing them good enough or in the same way. And it's really, we're all doing them in the way we're supposed to be doing them for our own paths and for our own healing and whatever it is we're here to do. And hers led her down one road and mine led me to mine.
Well, and if I can just say in terms of the irony, which I think is often the case for any of us in that comparative place where you talked about in the one episode about you thought I was better at tennis than you. We talked about that after the fact because I thought that was so silly. But I remember watching you and my backhand was atrocious and watching your two-handed backhand and being like, oh gosh, I wish I had that backhand, So even if you don't think the other person is thinking that, or you're just not giving yourself the benefit of, what you're bringing to the table or whatever that is, likely there's somebody on the other side wishing they had what you had, wishing they could be so fortunate as you. And I think it's important to come back to that at times too. And again, having people in your life that can remind you of that too is incredibly important and a gift. Still wish I had your backhand.
Oh, you're funny. So let's go to your journey. So you were in corporate America, working in a PR agency right outside of Manhattan. Everyone loved you. I remember they were like offering you promotions and whatever. And then what was that spark for you? I know you mentioned in your intro about knowing that you needed to work with children in some capacity, but what was that for you?
Yes. I mean, when I was in undergrad, I remember feeling this call. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatrician or something like that. I wanted to work with children. So I was halfway through my undergrad and I had applied for business. And I remember the essay that I wrote, which was about, I want to be successful. I want to make money. I having come from how we grew up struggling on that front, I just didn't want to be poor. And that was a huge motivation to me at the time, was to have financial success. But even in those early years, even though I wasn't making a ton of money, I obviously was doing okay and realized that just felt empty. Like it didn't matter. I was only 24, 25 and realized like, this isn't what I want. And when I really thought about it, I thought, well, yeah, even when I was in school and I talked about changing my major and possibly pursuing pre-med, and they were like, great, we'll have you for another 4 years. And I was like, no way. I'm like halfway through. And I liked what I was doing enough in marketing, but, I didn't listen to that. And obviously that's okay because I got here. But I think that was continually in the back of my mind and probably my heart, where ultimately the universe helped me because the company I was working for, if you remember, I went from that PR firm to a startup and it was very successful. And I worked my way up there as well. And then we ended up losing our funding and I had no more job. So that was really the impetus at that point, was it was taken away and it gave me that opportunity of, okay, if I'm going to pivot or if I'm going to do something different or start over, it seems like now's the time. And I had a goal at the time of going back to become a psychologist or a social worker because I found a program that just really spoke to my heart. It was working with children, war victims in Bosnia, and you had to have a master's in social work or psychology. And that was really like, okay, I'm going to do that because I want to go do this thing. And that motivated me, of course, by the time I actually finished my grad work, because it was a slow process for me, working and then going at night for many years. That NGO didn't even exist anymore to do that work. And so obviously that wasn't my path either, but it was at the time enough to motivate me to go in that direction. It gave me that like guidepost of, I have a choice to make and let's go down this road. And then obviously so many other things opened up from there.
I totally forgot about you losing your job, which is like a little bananas since that's the work I do. And I've talked about so many times that when people lose their job, it's usually the universe pointing you on a new path or a new direction or trying to find what's for you. So that's almost embarrassing, but
if you remember, I was in Japan and then I was trying to make my way back through like Hawaii for fun on the way back because I was like, well, I don't have a job to come back to, but that didn't work out. That was okay. But I never really had, I don't think, it feels like so long ago, I don't think I had this sense of panic either, even though I know I didn't have like a ton of money saved or anything. But I think our experiences growing up and having mom and granny as these role models of just being incredibly capable and women and survivors and you just do what you need to do. I never questioned I would be okay. I never questioned I wouldn't be able to live and make it work. And I did go back and work at a Starbucks. I worked at a retail store. It was like didn't matter, just had to pay my bills and be able to put myself through school. And I didn't care what I was doing at that point. So yeah, I feel very lucky that way.
Yeah. So you put yourself through school, which was forever. You got your master's, then decided you were going to pursue your doctorate, and then I just remember so many conversations of you being in these schools as a school psychologist and seeing such need and feeling a bit helpless and wondering how you could support these families and the kids and all of that. And then the shift to working with children with autism, was that through the work when you did one of your, what do they call it? Wasn't like an internship.
Practicums?
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah. I mean, when I was going through my grad school too, I thought, still want to work with children, not sure how, was doing school psychology. I was doing child and school psych and working in the school system through practicums and just feeling, like I don't want to do testing for myself. It's an incredibly important job and I obviously have all the respect for it and I actually do it now, but not in the capacity of a school psychologist where I really wanted to dig in on the counseling and the support because I had that and having gone to therapy at a very young age. And I think you've discussed this before in some of your other podcasts, but just having someone that helped me that way, I think also planted a seed in the back of my mind of wanting to help people and wanting to give other children the gift of that healing that I got from that experience. And I think I felt in the role as school psychologist, I felt very boxed in and I didn't like that. I really wanted to write my own ticket and I wanted to be able to do different things. So that is also why I decided to get my doctorate because I just was like, I need more options. So I'm going to do that so I can get licensed and I can do other things. But I did do a little bit of a stint at a children's hospital in the pediatric oncology ward and, realized like I am too much of an empath. I was interviewing children, cancer patients and their families trying to collect this data for these research studies. And I'm like, tearing up. I'm just so moved by their journeys and these children. And I want to like hug them and be with them, hang out with them and just be like, it's going to be okay. And here I'm supposed to be this researcher. And I wasn't good at it. It was too hard, I would say, for me, like hard on my heart, I guess. So again, props go out to all the people doing that work because, it's hard emotionally, I think. So I was ticking off these like, okay, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to do that. But I'm not sure what. And I actually saw a flyer when I was doing my practicum and we went to another school and there was a flyer hanging up on the wall for this lecture series at the hospital and people from Alpine Learning Group in New Jersey, where we lived at the time. The founder was giving a lecture. It was the last one. It was that night. And I just decided I'm going to go. And that was really what opened that door. I was so moved hearing her speak and hearing siblings of children that were in the school that had autism speak about their experiences of having a brother or sister with autism. And I was so moved by that. I went up to the speaker at the end of her talk and said, I want to see your school. And she said, okay. And I said, tomorrow. And she said, okay. So maybe it was 2 days, but I was getting the tour. I was in a classroom. And the kids came in wherever they had been. They came in the classroom, came running in. And it was just in that moment, I had that knowing. It was, oh, this is what I meant to do. These are the kids I meant to work with. And it really was from there. All of my experiences practically and clinically after that were just about learning how to work with and understand how to help these children.
Makes me teary hearing you talk about that journey. And it's a good reminder for me because when we're in this, of course, it's like I remember going to see you at Starbucks and going to you'd be exhausted and you'd be like, I have all these classes and trying to find time to even get together because she was, putting herself through school and going to school at night. And I mean, going through grad school and there's so many people out there doing it and just, I'm incredible admiration and just the amount of work and everything that it takes to get through that and put yourself through school and work a full-time job just is, I know I've said this to you, but it's just amazing. And I, for me, cannot imagine doing that. Honestly, I always joke that any type of higher education, I did graduate from college, but anything after that, I'm like, absolutely not. Like the formal education, I couldn't wait to be done with school. My husband's a lawyer, so obviously he went to a lot of school. You went through all your school.
But you were a huge support person for both of us.
I was. I'm like a support person, like a support animal for people. That's what I do. I'll support you while you do it, but I'm not going to do it myself. So I know that about myself. But for all those people who might be going through it now, hopefully on the other side of this, you'll be like, oh my gosh, so worth it, because I know your journey, obviously worth it. So you move into the field with autism and start that journey. Do you want to say anything else about that journey?
I was trying to get all these experiences to learn enough to be able to help these children. And ultimately, I can say they helped me just as much as I ever helped any of them or their families. And that's been also one of the greatest gifts of my life, being able to do this work and meet these children, and even adults. I worked with adults in a clinic setting before, and their families. But I think it's some of the first experiences I had having to be so present in sitting knee to knee with a child, and you're working with them and helping to try to get them to communicate in some way or just learn a new skill, whatever that was. And you're truly sitting there in a chair, knee to knee with them, eye to eye, if you could be, and the presence required for that. I think I see that now in my interactions with Finn and how important that is. But having those experiences early on with them, I don't think I was ever more present with myself and with them than in doing that work, which obviously is just such a gift in life, because I don't know that we all have that opportunity to feel that way in our work and find such great meaning and sense of responsibility, which at times can be hard because it's not always an easy road. And there's a lot of failure, a lot of, I'd say, learning, I guess, in terms of trial and error. I don't know that it's failure, but it's certainly not always being successful in the way that you think you're going to be. But I'd say this work and that path of bringing me out west, and that had a lot of impact on my spiritual journey. It's all connected, and that's pretty amazing to be able to look back and recognize that.
Yeah. And before we jump into that journey of, having a child, especially at a more advanced age, even I was like a geriatric pregnancy, which is like a hideous name. And I don't know, terrible. But maybe let's back up to your journey and where it started from a spiritual perspective. So you've already seen these seeds planted throughout our life. And then even that poster for the lecture and going to listen to the founder of Alpine speak. Obviously, it's all divine. You saw that. It was that night when that unfolded that entire path, which is so beautiful. But you started with yoga. That was something that you discovered, and it wasn't something that I partook in. I don't know if that's the word, that I ever participated in. And you also had worked with Karen as well. If you listen to my first episode about Karen and really opening up to these other incredible spiritual gifts that I didn't understand at the time. So if you just want to share a little bit about yoga, which we are going to be doing an episode on yoga and going pretty deep into that, that'll be soon.
I mean, it really was. I was at the gym working out, and I was weight training, and I was running and actually healing from my knee surgery, my last knee surgery at 30. And I saw there was yoga classes offered, and I happened to be there, and I was like, I'm just going to go in to the room. So, gym yoga classes can be very different from if you go to a studio, but I happened to just be so fortunate. They had incredible teachers at this place. And as I think back to all the yoga teachers I've had at different studios, 2 women that I'm thinking of that introduced me to very different yoga practices. It was amazing that they were there and teaching. And the one I ended up seeing her a year later when I went to my first studio, she was actually the first teacher that was there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're everywhere.
She was.
Yeah. And she had really been the person that had brought me into yoga. And so really for me, that was the first time different from any other fitness thing I had done. Of course, it wasn't about that. It was that first experience for me of going inward and connecting with my breath. Yoga is so much about it. First and foremost is about breathing. And I think that message of no matter where you go, no matter what you're doing, you said this too, you always have your breath. And even if you have nothing else, even if you don't have use of your limbs, you always have your breath, and you can always come back to that. And so that really stuck with me. And it was for me in working, I was doing my pre-doc and my post-doc when I had to take my licensing exams and then also my board certification for the therapy I was doing. And if I think about it now, number one, I'm just in awe of the energy, and I would give anything to have that again. But yoga was a huge piece of getting me through that, just being peaceful in the chaos. I think being able to quiet my mind to study, because I didn't have as much time as I thought I needed to study and get ready for these exams and stuff. But I think it brought me this sense of calm and peace that I was able to access at times, like taking those exams or studying, where I could just connect with myself. And then again, that kind of focus inward in a way that even doing traditional talk therapy hadn't given me, sitting on a mat, moving through different things, feeling your body, feeling your breath, and being very connected to that was such a different experience for me, and a life-changing one that I really appreciated, both from a physical perspective as well as an emotional or mental, and then ultimately a spiritual perspective.
And you also, I remember we were living together in New Jersey for a couple of years, and you had started going to, it's not AA. What's the one for?
Al-Anon.
Al-Anon. Yeah, you weren't in AA.
Yeah.
We grew up with, our grandmother was an alcoholic. And so you had gone to Al-Anon and met some community through that as well. And I didn't really understand it. You were going through this whole program. And so, I know that was really impactful.
It was, yeah. I think at first not recognizing what I needed from that. And to be honest, I guess it must have been, we both had the same therapist for a while. And I think maybe Bonnie suggested it. I don't remember. I remember struggling with codependency, essentially, in relationships. I was struggling in relationships and who I was in relationships, and kind of losing myself, which is, I guess, the semi-definition of codependency. And I was really struggling with that. And part of that, recognizing that some of that can come from, growing up in a family where that codependency also existed, and starting to read books like Codependent No More. And there's a few by Melody Beattie that probably some of your listeners have read, and talking about the 12-step program in that sense. So Al-Anon is for those who are not necessarily addicts themselves, but have grown up in codependency, is a big piece of that with Al-Anon. And so, being in a room, it just felt very comforting to listen to other people share not just their experiences. It was really about overcoming them or learning from them. And it wasn't all happy. There were still tons of struggles in these people's lives, especially with the addicts that they might have been married to or had a parent or a child of. There was a lot of struggle, a lot of pain, but they kept talking about being connected both to themselves and what is called in the program a higher power, or we would say creator, source, whatever. It's whatever you make of it, which I do love. Even from that perspective, it's however you identify that. And so being able to sit in those rooms and have an amazing woman, Patty, if you're listening, thank you, as a sponsor, who really took me through those steps and helped me, again, really focus inward and help me sit with myself. That was the first time I meditated. It was really about just being quiet, and I didn't think about it as meditation. It was just sitting in pain. Like, I was in an incredible amount of pain. And I think for so many people, you don't come to healing, you don't come to therapy, you don't come to those things unless it hurts and you want to change it, you want to heal it. And I was in an incredible amount of pain. And so even learning to just sit in that pain and work through it or breathe through it or write through it, that was my first experience too, with wanting to understand what I was feeling and why, and also how to write to help identify those things, which I think was probably tapping into what we know now of our guides and the messages that we get. I didn't know that at the time or think about it that way, but I certainly started journaling then, and all of those experiences were incredibly healing. Yeah.
And I remember I used to talk about getting up and journaling and writing for like a half hour. And I was like, what? I was like, what do you write for a half hour? It was so crazy to think that you would sit and just write about something. Almost, I think I was thinking at it from like a diary perspective, like having a diary when I was a kid. And it's so funny because if you think about that, most of the time you write in the diary because you were either really happy and wanted to share a memory, or usually it was more you were sad. Like you were sad about something, you felt left out, or you had a crush and that person didn't like you or something. So interestingly enough, if now that I'm thinking about that, I guess that was my first journaling experience, was writing in diaries. And I wasn't like a prolific diary keeper. I know I see people talking about having journals and diaries basically from early adolescents and still having them and looking at them. And that's not my story. I had probably 2 or something, but
Both had one aunt, like Aunt Sherry gave us or something. And I do also remember we had these like little locks on them. And I think I stole yours and opened it and maybe read it. And
yeah, I think you did.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, that was not nice. Don't read people's private thoughts without asking. But yeah, I mean, and then you've always been a writer. And it's interesting because the work you were doing, marketing, PR, you were always writing. You're always such a beautiful writer and had a really wonderful way of expressing yourself through words, even in like cards and anything you wrote, I feel like. So it's beautiful. That was a big part of your healing journey, is all these words and writing, and that was so healing for you. So you started working with our friend Karen as well to do different healing and modality. And I think neither one of us truly understood the extent of her gifts and the work she was doing with us. But I know you want to share a quick story of something that happened in one of your sessions.
Well, you were going to her first, and I went to her, same thing, just mostly out of pain. And Granny had died. It was very sad and really struggling with that. And I don't remember if it was my first session, first or second probably, but I remember her asking me if I felt anything change in the room. And I said, yes, it just got very cold. And she's like, yes, your Granny's here. That was her coming in. And I was like, okay. And I think I believed it because I wanted to, because I missed her so much. But also I think there was that kind of like, oh, let's see where this goes. Curiosity. I think curiosity is really important sometimes when you're not sure how to react to something, as opposed to just kind of shutting it down or going into that logical mind. So I listened, and she said she ended up showing her. She said, I'm looking at your Granny and she's in slippers and she's showing me the dress. She loved that you buried her in the dress that she had gotten for your wedding. And it was like one of her favorite dresses, and that you buried her in her slippers. And, you know, just the fact that I'd never said anything about any of that to Karen, that's not something that anyone could possibly even know. And so to me, that was just this incredible and profoundly moving experience to feel completely connected to her, to know. And Karen gave me that piece of, you know, she's still with you. She's always with you. She's always around you, even if you're not aware of it or can feel it in that way. She's with you, not just in your heart, but truly around you and with you. And to believe that, to be given that sense of that, brought me a level of peace that I hadn't felt since she had passed away. And I just had this incredible sadness. So to me, there was this joy and this happiness in knowing that she was still with us. And I think that brought me to that next level of being open to the fact that, yeah, there's more than meets the eye, and certainly loved ones in our life that stay with us, and just give that sense that there's more that happens after we leave the physical plane. And yeah, that was a life-changing experience for me.
Thank you for sharing that. So we were in New Jersey when you did your first silent retreat, right?
Well, I did, as part of Al-Anon, you have to go through a pretty exhaustive experience of writing. And in order to do that, I had to go on a retreat. So I did my own for that writing, and my girlfriend at the time, and I went on a retreat it was any type of 12-step program. It was at a convent, this beautiful place in Western New Jersey. And it was a silent retreat, and I had never done anything like that. And I had no idea what to expect. And it ended up being this incredibly beautiful thing. I remember sharing with you, and you're like, I don't know how I did it, but having this experience of being with people and not have to worry about what to say, not having to worry about listening or posturing or what do you want to share about yourself or how do you want to respond to something they shared. So there were, of course, sessions where everybody was in community together and talking and reflecting, and then you do your writing. But outside of that, it was silent. We ate in silence. We just were quiet. And yeah, there was just this freedom to just be, but be with other people. You didn't have to be alone, but you could be with yourself and with others. And it was, this just wonderful experience that we did several times because I found it so freeing and so restorative in a lot of ways. So I would definitely recommend it. And I've since gone to others where there's been similar, like Kripalu, Omega. I haven't done a silent retreat, but just, again, being in community with others, but not having to necessarily worry about the social aspect, I would recommend it.
Yeah. And I never thought of it that way because Bill and I just had a dinner with some people last night. We went to a birthday party, and it's interesting because we both talked about trying to make conversation with strangers. We were at the end of the table because we got there late. And especially as you get older, it's harder because I think, especially if you don't drink, like I don't drink at all alcohol, where it might loosen you up.
You don't need that.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty good at socializing, but I also have become very discerning, like what I want to talk about. And I'm not into as many frivolous topics. We did have actually a really cool conversation about bees because the woman next to us kept bees and she was actually sharing all these really cool things about it, which I love. But otherwise, we're kind of listening on conversation. People are talking about wine, and that's not really of interest to me, and other things. And I just think what used to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in silence and I can't talk to people, like I can't do that, now would be welcome. Where I'd be, yeah, I appreciate the power of community, the energy that is in a room and that people bring without ever saying anything. Our energy speaks volumes, sometimes positive and maybe a little more challenging. And so I can see how that would be a profound experience. And I've never experienced that, but yeah, I would love for people, if they've done silent retreats, to share. It obviously seems like it's a beautiful healing modality and way to connect to yourself.
Well, I would say at least my experiences in moving out west and then doing some other type of healing work that culminated in a multi-day silent retreat for myself. So I went to another place that I ended up going back to, Manitou Springs, which I consider a very spiritual place in Colorado. At least I'm very drawn to. There's a place called Garden of the Gods there. So I spend a lot of time just walking there and in walking meditation and writing. I'll just stop and sit on a rock and write if I feel called. And, those silent retreats, I had a profound healing experience with connecting with my inner child, and a lot of healing that happened as a result of that. And that was from just being quiet, which we know, talked about meditation and how that brings you to that place. And so having the opportunity to be quiet for several days, disconnected, not talking to anyone, and being able to just be with yourself, be in nature, so much comes in that you can really appreciate and listen to and learn from, even if it's not what you expect, which of course is like it never is. So there's just a tremendous beauty in that. And yes, I realize it's also a luxury to have that kind of time to be able to do that, especially now with an 18-month-old. And most of my silence now comes when I'm rocking him to sleep or sitting in his room waiting for him to fall asleep. That's where I connect now and find that silence for myself. It's very different, but it serves the same purpose ultimately.
I know you mentioned ecotherapy in psychology, which I guess you were participating in without knowing that you were participating in it.
Yeah. And I don't know, when I was thinking about this podcast, I'm not a practitioner in the way your other guests have been in terms of their experiences. But to me, it's the finding the spiritual in every day and how we do that. And to me, nature is a huge piece of that. I mean, one of the top things I wrote on my list when we were looking for houses back here was I want it to be a place of nature and connectedness, and just this retreat in our backyard, which is it's a sanctuary is really what I call it. And it is listening to the birds, watching the sunset through our backyard, and just being in nature that way. And I think that ultimately helps us connect to ourselves and everything around us. We are nature. It is in us and we are in it. And it makes us feel connected to every other sentient being on this earth plane. And that, to me, makes me feel an incredible sense of peace and belonging, and also responsibility in terms of the need to be mindful and compassionate and caring in how I move through this world and how I treat others, but also how I treat this earth and all the beings on it and in it. So ecotherapy is just, in psychology, it's truly the healing power of nature. And it's kind of a newer area, and it's not something that I'm practicing, but...
Well, you are. Even in this other form of therapy, you just didn't know it had a name, which someone's just slapped a name on it. But in the end, it's just, we are very blessed to have beautiful places like Longwood Gardens and Winterthur, places of just absolutely gorgeous preserved beauty that these families in the area that we live in, Chester County, Pennsylvania, found to be something that they wanted to preserve for the community and for the world, really, because Longwood Gardens has been voted the top botanical garden in the country. I don't know how many times, which is great, but also not great if you're local because it's really very busy.
But you have Winterthur and Stoneleigh and Natlands. And yeah, I just read that our area, so between Brandywine Valley, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, is America's garden capital. Did you know that?
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. But it makes sense.
Well,
And here we are.
it does make sense. And I love that. But I was thinking about the programs that some of especially Winterthur has with the Japanese, like forest bathing, how that's a beautiful practice. And so I think we're all doing these practices. We just don't see them as practices in the moment. It's like something that we're drawn to. And I think that's a beautiful thing. You were going on these retreats, having these experiences in nature that were so healing. And now it's okay, you can call it ecotherapy or walking meditations or whatever, but it was what you needed. Like you were following your own intuition and guidance, which would be divine guidance, to bring you to these places, and specifically these healing processes, which I think set you up for this next part that I just want to spend a couple minutes on. And I'm going to just put a disclaimer that we're going to talk about miscarriage. So if this is triggering for you and you're still healing or have experienced this and it might be difficult to hear, maybe fast forward a couple of minutes, and that's okay. You need to honor yourself in that. But you do a lot of work, come to the realization that you do want to have a child, which for a long time you thought you didn't. And you were I always thought you were masking that belief, because I never thought of it as you had other healing to do per se. I just thought you weren't in the right space and time and in the right kind of mindset or whatever to have a child. But I always thought it was insane to me thinking that you were not going to have a child, seeing as how we grew up around children. We both started babysitting when we were like 12. We helped take care of our little brother. We were always around children. We worked in the nursery at church, like we were kids ourselves. Like they let us watch kids. There was an adult there. But, how you were with my children, and this super fun aunt just got so much joy and prioritized coming to see my kids and being there for my children's births and being there to support my stepdaughter that we had full custody of. So, all those things, it was crazy to me thinking you didn't want children. And then, you do come to the realization, oh, I do. And being gay, obviously, you can't just say, okay, let's make a baby. There's a process there. I mean, you can, but you got to plan and you have to have the money and all of those things. And so, you go through this journey, and it was, I think, obviously a divine blessing that you were out in Colorado where you have the top fertility clinic in the country, right?
In the world, really. One of the best in the world, yeah.
So you're able to avail yourself of that. And so, so if you want to just talk a little bit about that journey, and unfortunately lost before Finn.
Yeah. I mean, it was a multi-year journey. So for anyone listening who's gone through that or is on that, I have the greatest amount of compassion and love for your experience and your journey. And it's probably one of the hardest that, at least for myself, I've ever been on. And it was punctuated by some loss as well. And going through that experience with my wife and going through IVF and multiple rounds of IVF, but the first round that we had, I was carrying her embryo and we got pregnant, and just the incredible joy of that and being able to share that with everybody. And then to go through that loss, and it's nothing short of heartbreaking. If I think about it now, and even then, because I had shared that news, the happiness part, with so many people. I worked in a school, I was a director there, and I had so many close colleagues that were just rooting for me and supporting me, let alone family and other friends. And so sharing in that joy, even though it was early on, we were just so excited. And then to have that loss, then you have to tell people, and it was like every time it was like this knife in the heart again. But at the same time, it opened up this conversation with so many people. As I shared, I can't tell you how many of my friends, even close friends and even family, who shared, I had a miscarriage or I had 2 miscarriages and I never talked about it, so I didn't share it many people at all. But yet that profound pain that you experience from that, it never goes away. Like I still feel that it lessens, but there's just that sense of a part of you that you lost is kind of always there. And it did bring that into the conversation when I think about the fact that miscarriage can happen in up to 30% of pregnancies. And that means up to 1 million women a year are experiencing this sadness, this shame, right? The fact that it's even like I miscarried, it right. puts it on us like we did something wrong, which no one's done anything wrong, And I think for me, that was part of my healing too, to recognize the divinity in that it led me on a path of reading about souls' journeys otherwise and things too, right? And so many things can change and free will, but of every soul coming in, I'll say on the night that I knew that I miscarried, I've never seen a more beautiful sunset. And I think that was for me. You know, that was that soul. That was my team of light trying to let me know it's going to be okay. You know, and ultimately it was. But it was so important, I think, that judgment that we can have on ourselves, that shame, you know, is just something where, at least for me, I knew I didn't have to be in that alone. You flew out and you were there with me. Mom was there, friends and family. It's that opportunity to allow others to support you and to surrender. You know, that ended up becoming the word for my life. I got it tattooed on myself because I needed that reminder and going through this journey of surrender. I had this whole plan. I thought I knew how it was going to work out. When I look at it now, I can look back with the absolute utmost of gratitude for all of it, including that pain. But at the time, obviously, it was incredibly sad and hard.
And what about the dream?
Yeah. So after that experience, I had to wait a little bit, and then I tried again. And by this time, we had actually moved out here. So we were in Pennsylvania, but I was flying back to Colorado to see our doctor. And so we flew out for a transfer. And the night before transfer, I had this very vivid dream. And I saw myself giving birth to a boy, and we only had girl embryos. And so I woke up, and literally the first thought was like, I'm going to have a boy. How did they get it so wrong? Like, how do they not know? We have these girl embryos, like it's science, but I'm going to have a boy. And that was this incredible knowing that I had, that I was given. And, you know, so I went through, obviously with the transfer, it wasn't successful. And even the one I had after that wasn't as well. And those were our girl embryos. And so that dream really was an anchor for me through the rest of my journey. And I felt it at the absolute core of my being that I would have a boy. And it was the anchor throughout. I didn't know how it was going to happen, to be honest, because we were out of embryos, and we won't go into all the specifics, but how I came to getting embryos and ending up having a close friend in this process of adopting other embryos. I couldn't have possibly imagined. I could never have predicted that. We were looking at adoption. We were looking at embryo adoption through our practice in Colorado, and that just didn't feel right. Like literally having the conversation. And I did listen to that, even though it was hard, because I knew that wasn't the path. And I said that to my wife, this is not it. We are not doing this embryo adoption through our clinic. I didn't know what it was going to be. And actually, I was scared for a while. I went away with 2 friends to Tulum on a bit of a retreat. And, you know, one had mentioned the possibility of reaching out to someone about their embryos. And that ended up putting us on a whole different path that, again, I couldn't have possibly imagined ever that that's how it would happen, but it did. And yeah, now I have a boy who I just couldn't imagine a more amazing soul to be a parent to, who is full of joy and love and light. And yeah, I don't know. I had to do something right at some point in my life to get him, but it's pretty incredible. And I have the benefit, of course, and the luxury of looking back on those experiences, being a parent now. And there were people along the way, including yourself and others, who had to remind me continually, you'll get there in some way. You will make that happen. And, you know, that was true. But for me, the idea of surrender, and I think that's a message for so many people on their spiritual journey, it's not about giving up, but it's also not about trying to control the outcome, because you just shut down possibilities when you do that. And the strength is in allowing. And so to me, surrendering means allowing. It means allowing possibilities to unfold and reveal themselves, and to be able to just go with that when it happens, which is exactly what we did.
And I think that's really important, what you shared, for those listening who might have gone through this experience, and knowing how many women do experience loss in some form or another. The shame that you were talking about, I want to acknowledge that and honor that, because I think we as a collective are holding so much pain. And now is the time that we can release that and not carry that. And it doesn't mean that you're not honoring that journey or that soul that was lost or your experience. You're actually honoring it. And I think it would tell you to let it go, that it was not meant for you to hold on to and continually live in suffering or be alone. Maybe it's your thing that connects you to someone else, your story, your journey that brings different people into your life or onto your path. It's meant for something. And as hard as it can be to hear, it's all part of your plan that you had coming into this life was to have that experience for one reason. So trying to find the meaning in that, I think, is incredibly powerful as you look back and think of all the different paths, because Finn wouldn't be here if you didn't have that experience. You might have said, one's enough, I'm good. And so thinking how you get to this outcome now, it was all part of it. And, we've talked a lot about in your journey, the pain and coming to these different practices and healing and finding even nature and even simple practices like meditation, journaling, how incredibly healing they've been in that, also that community that you've come to so many times. You've built so many different communities and in different phases of your life, and they've contributed a lot. And I know you've contributed a lot to them in return. So just for those women, the message of surrender, I think, is really beautiful and powerful, but also don't carry shame with that because it's not serving you. It's not meant to be part of that journey or experience. We all come from a very loving source and place, and just know you're very loved and held, and hopefully you have someone to remind you of that as well. And if not, then hopefully you hear it here.
Right.
So then right now, a stay-at-home mom, even though we have the privilege, I don't know if you'd say it's a privilege because we can be a pain in the butt, but of helping me in my work right now. And then you also are still helping different schools when you can, just kind of ad hoc. But I do want to end on spiritual practices when you are a new mom, because I do think, like, looking back, my youngest just turned 10 a couple weeks ago, which is mind-boggling. And you're always asking me, like, do you remember this, or did your kids do that? And like, it's all just a blur now. It's like you think when you're in it, you're not going to make it, or you just have to survive day to day. And now looking back, I'm like, I just don't even remember so many things I do, of course, but lots of those specifics of did they do this or that? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't sleep for like 8 years. And so thinking about being a mom and having spiritual practices and even fitting in a workout or a walk in nature or anything can feel really daunting. But I think you have found, because I talk to you every day and know so much of what you're doing, all these micro moments of spiritual practices. And so if you want to just share about what that's like and how you've been able to embrace that being home with Finn, and then how he's helped you with these spiritual practices, and then how you're guiding him in this really beautiful way to be so connected. And it's really awesome to watch.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I mean, I can appreciate, as you've heard, the blow by blow on a daily basis for me of the challenges of not being able to do the same thing. And actually, I appreciate, I was just listening to Rebecca Campbell, who I know you talked about on your podcast previously, sharing how she hadn't done a morning meditation like in 5 years since her kids were born. And here she is, like, that's her life's work. She's a writer, she's a podcaster, she does retreats. And yet here she is. And to me, sometimes it's like so validating.
Someone who makes a living running a community of spiritual stuff, and she's having trouble fitting in her own practices. Yes.
Yes. So I think to me, yes, it's, oh, wow, okay, I'm not alone in that. And I think it's finding that magic that I get to live and see and experience wonder and awe through Finn's eyes every single day. And I try to be very present in that, to see that. So for us, yes, a big part of that is nature. It's how we start even most of our days, going to put our bird feeder out and listening to the birds. I watch him listening to the sounds around him and tuning into that so much. And, it's inspiring to me to just be quiet and do that, and just grounding, being on the earth. Like, we walk barefoot and in the grass and feel that connection to the earth. We watch the sunrise, we watch the sunset. And, I think you and Emily in the first episode on meditation, one of your first episodes, talked about it's not about sitting on a mat for 30 minutes. You can find a meditative practice in watching a sunset or listening to the ocean. And that's truly what I embody because it's all I have time for most of the time. I do a gratitude practice that I would love to say it starts in the morning, but a lot of my mornings start by jumping out of bed to a crying baby. And then it's about his needs and taking care of him. And so finding those moments when I am holding him, when I am putting him to sleep, that is my time. I pray, I practice gratitude. I acknowledge all of the beauty and the team that are supporting me and Finn and my family and abundance and just, practicing that gratitude in those silent moments. And sometimes I fall asleep if I try to meditate before bed now. I honestly, most of the time I fall asleep. We went to a Brian Weiss retreat and I was pregnant and exhausted and struggling with migraines and other things. And I don't think I truly did one regression in those times. I mostly rested, and that was probably what I needed to
All the information was coming in. You were doing the work, whether you were actually awake or not.
Tap into that at some point. But, I think sometimes especially if you've had a practice and you feel almost that lost, and it's not a loss, it changes. It changes for everyone anyway. If I think about what you and I were talking about 5 years ago and what we were talking about now, how different that is and how much it's evolved and changed and grown. And so I have to keep coming back to it's enough. Telling me I have you to remind me as well that it's enough what I'm doing right now in staying connected in that way. And I, in moments, acknowledge through gratitude things that happen. And I have all these data points along the way to really refer back to in terms of finding that inspiration and meaning, and also reminders that I'm not alone and that we're loved and being taken care of. And I think when I look at Finn, what I want most for him, what I want to teach him in this world is to honor himself, to honor his place in this world, but also to love, to be a loving human and to spread that and share that. And I see that in him. I see that how people respond to him. I truly believe he's my greatest teacher in being that and embodying that. And so that alone is like, I just have this awesome reminder in pretty much every moment of my day about that. And getting to see that through his eyes. So that's the extent. I can't say I'm journaling a ton. I try when I can. And I certainly listen to podcasts and things when I can, when I'm cooking or cleaning or doing the dishes at the end of the night. So I feel like I'm doing what I can when I can. And
You're not shitting all over yourself.
Yeah, well, no sometimes I am, but but it's enough, and I think that's important too. And it's another example of surrendering and the moment and just accepting what is, and also knowing that this is like a moment in time and I'm never going to get it back. And so I need to be present for what it is and appreciate what it is. And I'm not always perfect at that, and that's okay, but it's pretty easy to come back to, I just have to look at him or think about him and I'm back there. So,
well, it's a beautiful place to end our conversation today. Just for those parents out there, you could be a stay-at-home dad too, who maybe the mom or the other dad or whoever is in your family, or maybe you're a single dad raising a child or a baby. Just know you're doing enough in this moment and being on this other side of having babies. Not that my kids don't, they're a huge, big chunk of my day every day. And I even struggle sometimes to fit my workouts in with activities. It shifts, it's different. But just knowing that one thing you can do for yourself is incredibly important. If it's writing, if it's doing a gratitude practice in your head, you don't have to sit in front of a journal. You don't have to meditate by sitting on a mat like we've talked about. It could be out in nature, listening to the birds, sitting on your porch, going for a walk with your child or dog or yourself, whatever it is, but just specifically to the parents, because that's where we went in this conversation. Just know whatever you're doing is enough. And every day will shift and change. And maybe you bring something else in down the road and maybe you don't. And that's okay.
I just want to acknowledge that it's hard. I'm tired, and I don't think we really talked about that because we talk about all the joys, and I don't mean to sugarcoat the hard parts. It's hard being a parent, and our children are like literally our hearts outside of ourselves, I think. And so finding something for yourself that you can do to, keep yourself grounded. And sometimes that literally is just taking a deep breath when Finn's having a tantrum or losing it in some ways too. It's not all rainbows and sunshine.
And it might be just stepping outside in the backyard barefoot, just asking yourself to be connected to the earth, to acknowledge the land, to acknowledge your journey, and just, take some breaths. Look at a bird, look at the sky, look at a tree, talk to a tree.
Mm-hmm.
That might be it. And that's enough.
Yep.
So it's all enough. Well, thank you for being here, Twin A.
It's an honor. I am very grateful to be here, and I'm so proud of you and what you've created in this podcast and community and your journey, and bringing me along for the ride on that too. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I receive that, but also I think as we flowed through this conversation, hearing your journey, and I think being reminded of all of those steps along the way of all the work you did, and I'm sure planting seeds for me of all these different things. And I know you see that in me now with different things, but we've been doing the same thing for each other the whole time. So it's actually been kind of fun and enlightening to unpack this as I'm thinking about both of our journeys, and then where we are now and how we're in this place. And it's just really cool to look at it now from a higher perspective and think about all those different seeds that we planted for each other. For those who needed to receive some of these messages of things that we shared today, even when it feels hard or sad or really emotional, someone needed to hear them today. So we're sending you lots of love as you receive this, and hope it's what you need. And we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your precious day to listen to our podcast. If this episode resonated with you, we would love for you to share it with someone you love. That would mean the world to us. Also, if you feel called, please follow our show so you will know when a new episode drops. If you want to go one step further, you can even rate this episode, as it allows our podcast to find its way to others. Lastly, we've done our best to share resources that you might find helpful in the show notes, whether that's a book recommendation or a website we referenced during the episode, a free resource, or more information on a guest who took their time to speak with us and share their knowledge. We would love for you to support their work too. You can find more information on our podcast website at becomingspiritual.me. We love you and can't wait for you to hear the next episode. Until then, know you have a place where you are welcome and you are loved. Welcome home.